Today was an event that culminated a year-long pilot project to implement complete streets in Baton Rouge.
It is a community issue because if you make streets safe for the older members of the family, then you've made them safe for everybody.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Landry, and I'm the managing partner of Fishman Haygood's Baton Rouge office, and we are delighted to sponsor this presentation. In the last few years, mayors and other community officials across the country have begun to draw on the reams of data at their disposal about income, crime, traffic, fire, utility consumption, illness, and the like, trying to tackle in a very progressive way community issues. Whether it's making it easier for residents to find parking places or guiding hospital administrators as to where health care needs to be provided, or even as simply as where smoke detectors are better distributed in a community. This happened in New Orleans, where 18,000 smoke detectors were given out in areas where the fire department determined that was the highest risk of fire damage. Big data technologies are beginning to transform the way cities are dealing with urban issues. A smart city is an urban area that uses different types of electronic data to supply information used to manage assets and resources efficiently. The City of Lafayette has made great strides in becoming a smarter city through its plans, practices, policies, and partnerships. Lafayette has partnered with the University of Louisiana Lafayette and CGI in an ongoing partnership that will integrate information systems and enable open data initiatives that will also leverage the emerging information technology sector in Lafayette together with educational resources. Leading the effort are the three gentlemen with us today: Mayor President Joel Robideaux, Will LaBar, Ramesh Kolluru. Mayor Robideaux is a former member of the Louisiana House of Representatives for Lafayette's District 45. He was also elected Speaker Pro Tem of the House, the first Speaker Pro Tem who at the time was an independent ever to hold that position. When he was term limited, he ran for mayor and took office in January of 2016, campaigning on a promise of working together. He has participated in and conducted numerous workshops with renowned land use and planning experts to address the parish's budget crisis and create a more resilient community. He has launched a new initiative, which I particularly like, to capitalize on Lafayette's culture. I'm from Lafayette. I've known the mayor as long as I've known my sister. Lafayette's culture to further diversify the economy, create culture, recreation, entertainment, arts, tourism, and economy is a parish-wide interagency initiative to expand upon what is, I believe, Lafayette's greatest assets, its people and culture. Will LaBar, to the mayor's right, is the vice president of CGI, the world's fifth largest independent IT and business practice service company. Will provide support for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, focusing on the collection, exchange, and use of environmental data, as well as CGI's onshore delivery. And by the way, Will is 2 over now that I look at where he's seated. Will is working with the mayor's team on the Open Data Initiative. Although born in New Jersey, he's been in Lafayette for 7 years, and he was named by the administration an honorary Cajun, which he's very, very proud of. Ramesh, who is in the middle, is Vice President for Research, Innovation, and Economic Development. He's a professor in the School of Computing and Informatics at the University of Louisiana Lafayette. In that role, he drives the university's transition to a top-tier modern research university, one that is committed to research for a reason, through research scholarship and innovation. His leadership efforts include stimulating activities related to sponsored research, doctoral programs, technology transfer, and the like. He's got lots of hats. He sees operations of the University Research Park as well as various research centers within the university. Clearly, this is a terrific team to talk to us about smarter cities and the initiative that has begun in Lafayette. So would you welcome our panel? Mayor?
So, I'm supposed to talk about smart city initiatives and things that everybody in this room knows more about than I do. So, let me just say this to get started. It's not rocket science, but it is hard. And the reason it's hard is by way of an example, the email that I got yesterday that said that my CREATE initiative and all these smart city initiatives are part of the New World Order, and that it is a big government conspiracy to run everything, and that a vote for anything that has to do with smart city initiatives and the CREATE initiative or anything that uses any of those buzzwords is an attempt to take over individuals' life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And so, as I try to address those issues, you realize that it's more difficult to answer those questions than it is to become a smart city. And so I chose to ignore them. But there is a reality out there, which is sad to admit, that exists, that if you're trying to do things that are logical, that make sense, that take advantage of technology that exists in your community, that somehow that's a bad thing. And I'm proud that the folks that were elected before me in Lafayette put into place a fiber network that has benefited the city in numerous ways, and it allows me to now implement a lot of the things that other great cities are doing, and allowing us to be an example of medium-sized cities being able to accomplish a lot. So one of the things we feel very strongly about is that if we can't explain how this is going to benefit you, then it really isn't worth us going down that path. And so when people are complaining about traffic and being stuck in traffic, and all of us are stuck in the, I don't know if they think we have helicopters or what, but we're stuck in that same traffic. And so we're trying to figure out, what do we do, right? How do we solve it? And you solve it with these smart city initiatives. You solve it with technology and cameras and all the technology that Warren Abbott can provide to monitor those lights and keep them green longer where they need to be and shorten them where that needs to happen. And so that's the overriding sentiment for me, if I want to dumb it down to my level and to the level that I think the vast majority of our citizens want is, hey, just make sure that it's improving whatever it is you're working on and whatever our day-to-day lives are faced with, that there's improvement. So the foundation that we have, I mentioned the LUS fiber, and then our Plan Lafayette document that we had a lot of staff that's here today from Lafayette that worked on creating that. And then of course you see beneath that the university, that Ramesh will speak a lot more about what those guys are doing. And that foundation that I inherited, right? I didn't have anything to do with it other than I went to UL. Well, I went to LSU too, so and I got kicked out of both of them and admitted back in and ended up graduating from both of them. So I have a strong feelings for those universities because they let me back in. And the fiber, I was actually in the legislature when Joey Durrell and the administration passed that. So I was able to participate at the legislative level getting that implemented. And it taught me a really good lesson. Boy, I probably shouldn't say some of the stuff that I say. This is why y'all give me slides so I don't get off track. But I remember just being elected, going to the Capitol. This whole fiber initiative is there. Lafayette's pushing hard for it. And, you know, there's pushback, and there's, you know, Fair Competition Act and all kind of legal reasons that there should be some pushback. And we're trying to negotiate it. And Randy Haney, who's a dear friend, and he's in the meeting with us as our lobbyist for the city. And we're talking about everything that we need to do and what the bill needs to say and how it needs to be written. And then, so I'm like, okay, all right, good, I got it. This legislative thing, I understand it. Now I see what a role a lobbyist plays. And so he said, okay, let's go to the next meeting. And so we went to meet with, you know, AT&T to kind of hash out the problems that existed. And we get in there, and Randy's AT&T's lobbyist. And I remember thinking, this guy's got to be the greatest lobbyist in the world. He's sitting here in one meeting with me, and then we go to a room next door, and he's the AT&T lobbyist. And to show you how good he is, it all got worked out, and everybody loves each other, and it's working great for all of us. But I digress. So here is really some of the things that, just like every other community, Lafayette faces, right? Our population and economy are growing, and maybe not everybody faces that, but certainly we lack infrastructure and the funding for that, quality of life issues. We don't have a parish-wide parks and recreation tax that I think most cities our size and larger have. But we have municipalities within the parish that tax themselves and built these incredible sports complexes, which means that those segments of the parish are never going to vote for a parish-wide recreation tax because they said we already taxed ourselves and built a 100-acre sports complex, so we don't need to do it. So we have the same problems everybody else has, and we try to figure these things out. And of course, we try to do it in a smart way, and flooding is obviously our newest problem, as it is for much of this area also. And the smart city initiatives, in spite of the email that I received, are going to be the way that we figure out what needs to happen. So with that, we've been very fortunate that we've attracted technology companies like CGI, Will's here, Inquero, Proficient, Waiter. You can see the economic impact that these companies have had. And the best part about having this is not just the obvious benefits, right? Not just that they bring jobs and they bring really good jobs, and that they benefit our economy and our tax base and all the things that go with attracting, but they bring the employees here that understand the technology and the smart city initiatives, not only so that they can help us, right, but they're actually pushing us. They won't accept, when they ask for projects that we're working on for drainage, they're not going to accept the Excel spreadsheet, right, from us. Or worse than that, a handwritten sheet. They're going to want to see dashboards. They're going to want to see things that they can digest in ways and manipulate in ways to see if it's working and correct us, you know, where it's not. And so anytime we can partner with these guys, we want to do it. And certainly CGI has been such an incredible partner for us. So it's working for us here. And then I'm going to get to the CREATE initiative. And this is the one that caused the whole email string yesterday that talked about boiling frogs and New World Order and all kind of bizarre things. But it's really not about that, in case you were wondering. It really is. It's our culture, recreation, entertainment, arts, and tourism economy. And in Lafayette, we're very, very fortunate. I mean, we have something that is unique. We didn't do anything to get it. We don't deserve it. It's just there. Everywhere I go, people assume I know something about food. They assume I know something about music. They just assume Cajun, the heart of Cajun country, Lafayette, he's got to know something about that. Now, a lot of them still think we take pirogues to work, but that's what we're working on, right? That's the mindset that we need to change. Government has never, for all the benefits that our cultural economy has provided, which is our second largest industry, employs more people than anything except for the oil and gas industry. But for all of that, it's really been driven by individuals or organizations. Government has played no role in any of that. And I look around to Nashville, you know, becoming the country music capital of the world, and they just made that up, right? I mean, it was brilliant, right? They had the Grand Ole Opry, so somebody popped into their head, hey, why don't we just say we're like that everywhere? And they spent some money, and they were very strategic, and they had a vision. And there's no question now that they are the country music capital of the world. And we don't even have to make it up in Lafayette. I mean, we are what these pictures reflect, and we have this unique culture, and we can do a much better job. And so with the CREATE initiative, we're hoping to seed some investment money to capitalize on what already exists, and feel very confident that it's ultimately going to replace the oil and gas as the #1 component of our economy. It'll become that stable base. We won't be subject to the rise and fall of oil and gas prices and all these variables that we can't control. We can control this, right? This is something we understand, we know, and so I think it's an initiative that is past its time, and I'm looking forward, and on November the 19th, y'all can email me and find out if I was able to convince the voters that it's a good initiative. Recently, we connected Lafayette with Stavanger, Norway. We used augmented reality and those goggle-looking things. What are they called, Will? HoloLens. Microsoft gave us these HoloLens, and you can see our artist all the way to the left painting a mural at the same time as the artist from Norway on the right, and it was a really great exposure for the city of Lafayette, in that we sent our head of our utility system, our director, Terry Huval, who happens to be a Cajun musician, and he brought some of his musicians there, and he met up with some of his friends that actually are old musicians that live up in Norway now, and they put on a concert for the folks in Norway and exposed them to our music at the same time that they were getting exposed to our artwork and a little bit about our culture. So that's just an example of the kinds of things that you can do when you have, you know, a connected city. Recently, we've got this little creature named Yardley, which I have to say, when I took office, I thought that we had really kind of pilfered Project Front Yard from somewhere else, because it was really so well done. And I found out that we had done it, not me, but that the previous administration had made all this up on their own, and that it really had taken off. I mean, it really has its own brand, its own identity, and it's more than anything else, it's a mindset that it's all our front yards, and so let's take care of our city and do it. And they came up with the little gnome and called him Yardley. And so it's done well, right? Over the 2 years, there's other communities that have reached out to want to cheat off of us and do the same thing. And then recently, we partnered with CGI, and I can't even say we partnered with them. I think CGI just did it and then told us about it, but we'll take credit as a partner. And they got interns that came in and created this app. I don't know, how many weeks, Will? You can tell them, I guess, when it's your turn. 10 weeks. 10 weeks, they create this app, they gamify to where you can, you know, like earn like helmet stickers if you're on a football team, right? You can earn little gnomes as you do these beautification projects, whether it's a trash bash, whether it's a cleanup, regardless of what it is, it's a way to go online, organize, invite people, and then everybody gets credit for doing it. And then what it does for us, as much as anything, is it gives us data of who the volunteers are, where they live, what types of projects they're doing, and when we need help with any kind of outreach, we have a place where we can go, where we know we have an engaged group that would be willing to help. So it's something that really happened over the course of maybe the last 6 months or so, right? So we also received a grant from Mozilla. I think it was a $150,000 grant. We've done maybe 4 projects so far, education-based, mostly STEM education and those types of things. And again, if we weren't a connected city and we hadn't done the things, 10 years ago, we wouldn't even be able to have conversations with the Mozillas of the world to be able to secure grants to expand what all we're trying to accomplish. These are the ones that were funded recently. I talked about the STEM Academy, the Science Museum. There's a virtual reality tour of coastal erosion. The UL's has a 4K streaming video, and then the CLECO has an energy center, alternative energy center, that you can take a field trip virtually to it. Congress, this complete street. So when you see this, and you go now, and so we say, well, what did you do? Well, we put some stripes on the road. I mean, and that's really all we did, right? And I remember Carly came to me and said, hey, we need to engage in this complete street project for Congress, and blah, 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 and goes through the whole sales pitch, as she should, as my planning and zoning director. And so, anytime you start hearing all that stuff, I'm just thinking dollars, and okay, how much is this going to cost? And then I said, so how much, what are we talking about? And she said, well, we're just restriping the road. It's not going to cost, but, I don't know, $70,000. I don't even know if it was that much. I'm probably exaggerating. So the little things, and let me tell you, the emails I got about how I was going to hell because we were doing this, and that Lafayette would never be the same, and these 3 blocks of restriping was going to ruin everything that every previous administration had ever done good, and they weren't going to be able to get to work, and it was constant, right? And the same people that sent those emails had the decency to send me an email 2 months after it was finished saying, hey, it's not nearly as bad as we thought it was going to be. In fact, we should have done this sooner, and where are y'all doing it again the next time? Because it's really working. It's added parking on the street. It's much easier, much safer. We've got you can see the statistics that we're able to glean from the data. And so these simple type of things don't cost a lot of money, but really do make a difference in what your city looks like and how people enjoy it. So, all right, so at this point, I have no idea what this slide's about, which means it's probably Ramesh's turn. But, so let me just say, we did the fiber initiative, right, under the previous administration, and that was great. And with that came a whole lot of other benefits. And I don't know if anyone from AT&T and Cox are here. I saw Fran earlier, but I have to say, what's happened because of that is Cox has become engaged and is a great corporate citizen for Lafayette. I don't know if y'all were here for the Chattanooga mayor where he talks about the equality for digital equality. They offer the $9.99 package to free and reduced lunch families. And so everybody kind of benefits from it in our community because Cox gets better and AT&T gets better and LUS gets better. And so it just keeps getting better because everyone's participating. And so don't be, the only reason I'm telling you all of that or bothering to say it is don't ever be afraid to venture out to somewhere that you're not sure how it's going to work out or not. Whether it's the simple restriping of a street or it's engaging something as bold as a fiber initiative, what it ultimately happens is your community will be better off. People will respond because they want their leaders to have vision, to push for it. So continue to do that. The people that you serve and work with will appreciate it in the long run. Maybe not initially, but certainly in the long run. So thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to Ramesh.
In addition to being from Lafayette, the mayor and I both have something in common. We both get very interesting emails. I got my cousin from Nigeria wanting to give me a lot of money, so I'll tell you how that works. And we can have the smartest city in the country. So speaking of smart cities, for us as a university, it is important to look at the world as not only what it is today, but to reimagine a world that can be driven by research and innovation, and at the end of the day, make the lives of citizens better. Allowing the city to offer better, greater, more affordable quality of services, and that, we believe, is what a research university should be about. And so as such, we took on our role as a research university in the context of building a smart community and a smart city very seriously, and looked at the various ways in which we could impact the community and we could help move the needle. And we found immediately opportunities to do that in the area of public safety, in the area of education and economic development, and also impacting public health, wellness, and moving the needle for a state that is ranked at the bottom of every good indicator in the area of healthcare and education. It was important for us to impact through the university what it is that we can do. And our tagline, research for a reason, we could find no better reasons than these three to apply the intellectual capacities and the capabilities of the university and our researchers to have them solve and take on these kinds of problems. But as we heard throughout this conference, plans are just those. You need organizational structures and infrastructure to help implement the plan. And as such, we have a variety of research centers and institutes and academic programs undergirding initiatives in each of these areas, because these are the folks that wake up every day wanting to move the needle and impacting what it is that we do through our research efforts directed at solving problems that we identify with our community partners from CGI, from the city, and making sure that we were aligning all of our assets and solutions to solving problems. One of those in the area of smart public safety is an initiative that the university is involved not only within the state of Louisiana, not only within the city of Lafayette, but nationally with the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST. UL Lafayette leads the national initiative to develop concepts for smart public safety. And on the bottom left-hand corner, you see the portfolio of NIST in the area of Global City Teams Challenge. And UL Lafayette writes the RFP for community holders, for community stakeholders from across the country that are wanting to do something in the area of improving public safety within the United States and beyond. The RFP and the architecture for how we use smart city concepts to build and deliver better quality public safety applications driven by research is something that UL Lafayette leads. We produce some solutions, but we also provide the architecture within which those solutions can be developed and integrated for stakeholders at the state level with the Governor's Office of Homeland Security Emergency Preparedness, with folks within the city, with our OEPs at the city level, as well as at the federal level with the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. This is an initiative of NIST that UL Lafayette leads for the United States. We also here close to home, we lead the governor's effort during every disaster across multiple administrations by leading the entity known as the Louisiana Business Emergency Operations Center. This is the state of Louisiana's public-private partnership as it relates to building resiliency by engaging private sector and public sector stakeholders in an information sharing situational awareness platform before, during, and after disasters. And recently, this technology was showcased in the city of Austin as part of the US Ignite 2016 Smart Community Week in Austin, Texas. And this was of the 135 applications that were showcased at that platform. This was the one that was voted as the most likely to have a big impact nationally because of the very way in which you bring in the public sector, the private sector, and non-for-profit actors that are all involved in managing every disaster in every community, large and small disasters, large and small communities. There is a need for coordination between the public and the private sector responses before, during, and after a disaster. And this platform brings those in a very elegant and an effective manner. And what we developed at UL Lafayette is now part of the state of Louisiana's official activation during Hurricanes Gustav, Ike, Mississippi River flooding, the most recent flooding in 2016, and has become somewhat of a national model with over 30 cities embracing this model. And so we give our blueprint to every city, every community that wants to do a better job of integrating their efforts with the private sector partners. We give our blueprint because as a university, we are not in this to make money. We are in this to take the knowledge that we produce at the university and have that impact the society. And so we are very proud to be a part of that effort. We are also using smart city approaches and technologies to really identify and mapping social networks, because in every community we find, we saw examples of this during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. It was not necessarily the person in the office that it was important to hear from. It was important to hear from those individuals that people had great amount of trust in, those individuals that had the greatest social capital. So the person that you look to as a community leader, the deacon of a church, these are the folks that were most effective in getting a message out for an evacuation, for managing the disaster, and so on. So we are actually using social network analytics approaches that are commonly used in technology, in Facebook, and so on and so forth, in helping mapping influencers, and using that approach in every community to understand how you can build a resilient community ground up by identifying individuals within those communities who have the most social capital, the influencers, if you will, in each community, and having them, co-opting them into our cause. And this is a project that, unfortunately, we had to build after the incident that happened in Lafayette, Louisiana, with the Grand 16 Theater incident, a shooting that happened at that, and a National Science Foundation funded this effort because far too often we have shootings that happen in our communities across the country. So how do we build resilient communities ground up is indeed an example of what we are trying to do here. A situation or an example that we are using the community's assets with LUS fiber and the fastest, cheapest, most affordable fiber that we've built in Lafayette, Louisiana, is a project that's actually allowing us to help manage disasters in more effective way. All of us, before and during a disaster, one of the first things that we do is to get on our cell phone. And we call our loved ones, we call our families, we call into the emergency operations center perhaps to report an incident. And that causes significant congestion on our communication networks. So what we are trying to do at the university, what our researchers are working on, are building solutions that allow software-defined networking, that allows a piece of software to commandeer the internet and say, what Ramesh is trying to do watching Netflix in the middle of the hurricane is really not what we should be using bandwidth for, but let us give Will more bandwidth because he's trying to get a piece of information that is important to the Emergency Operations Center. So my quality of my service on Netflix drops because that's not the most important use of the bandwidth at that time, and Will get greater quality of service on the network, so we are able to get a piece of information to the Emergency Management Center or the Emergency Operations Center that may be the difference between saving lives or losing lives. So the folks at the university are working on technology that is now being looked at by the Department of Homeland Security to get incorporated into every Emergency Operations Center. You folks in Baton Rouge and Lafayette know all too well the devastations that we faced in 2016 and continue to because of the flooding situation. Researchers are using sensors and smart solution approaches to monitor the level of flooding and riverine stages in each of our waterways and to predict which of these sensors are likely to be inundated, which of these rivers are likely to overflow, and have a pathway to the emergency operations centers and the first responder communities to be able to get people out of harm's way and to minimize the loss of life and property that goes along with those. And this is a project that we are already beginning to install in some of our riverine systems in Lafayette. And the architecture for this is something that we are working with the Water Institute so we can build this as a statewide network. And our friends from CGI are involved in this effort as well. So for us, gigabit applications and being a gigabit community creates great opportunities for us to leverage the infrastructure to do some things that we've never been able to do before. For us, we look at this as smart communities as an economic driver and focusing on reducing the digital divide. I mean, that's something that the mayor of Chattanooga spoke to very elegantly, and creating opportunities for high schools, for low-income families to access a host of applications that provide them access to civic services, that provide them access to educational content. As you're beginning to see here, one of our faculty members is an educator/oral historian that is documenting the nation's first climate change refugees that's happening in Isle-de-Jean-Charles, which is about 2 hours south of where we are located. These are the nation's first climate change refugees. And she is bringing curriculum. She's actually developing curriculum that allows K through 12 teachers to speak to high school students and middle school students as to what is the impact of climate change, what is the impact of coastal land loss that we are experiencing. We've all heard the statistic, right? We are losing a football field of wetlands every year. What does that mean to you and me? What does that mean to our next generation of folks who will lose the way of life? So folks that have lived for 400 to 500 years on Isle-de-Jean-Charles are being repatriated someplace else because of climate change. And we want to be able to bring that education and information, and we are doing that using virtual reality so that they can see that loss, they can hear that loss, and they can feel what the loss of land would look like, because the loss of land in their case is the loss of home. And we are also bringing to life using one of the University of Louisiana is designated by the National Science Foundation as the nation's only NSF Center of Excellence in the area of big data. We do that in partnership with 8 other universities and about 40 Fortune 100, 500 companies that we work with in a partnership on a daily basis to produce the next generation of solutions using big data, and our infrastructure investments into fiber to the home have enabled us to take a leadership position along with the university's long-standing history in the area of computing. UL Lafayette offered the nation's first master's degree in computer science back in 1962. So I tell people we were geeks before Big Bang Theory made it cool to be a geek. And we continue to build on those trends by now being designated 40, 60 years later as the nation's only NSF Center of Excellence in the area of big data. And we are using that data-driven analytical capabilities and technologies to help deliver more information, more timely information into the hands of patients so they can take control of their own healthcare. So this is an analysis that we've produced, a digitally interactive analysis where people can figure out which hospital, when they visit that hospital, is likely to have them come back to it because they have to get readmitted for that particular trauma, which is not something that you or I want to do. So it tells us that for this particular type of trauma, this particular type of hospital has better quality outcomes, and that is who I want to engage with. Again, power in the hands of the right people that allows us to take these kinds of research that we are developing at the university and produce solutions and create those solutions and make those solutions available to our citizens in our state and our community, so we have the smart city, smart community opportunity. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to Will so he can clean up my mess.
All right. So I think we're running short on time, but I'm going to remember the fact that Ramesh is going to prioritize my bandwidth needs over everyone else's. So I think that's a great research project. I'm 100% behind it. I think I'm really excited and honored to be on a panel with these two distinguished gentlemen. I want to thank CPEX for the opportunity to speak as well. And what I wanted to touch on a little bit was maybe a use case specific, like dive deep into one of the examples that we've been talking about that really brings these stakeholders together of citizens, government, the research institutions, and industry together within the community. And there's two sides or multiple dimensions to this case study, really, that focus on economic development and diversification, workforce development, smart cities, which is centered on improving quality of life and quality of services, digital equity, which has been mentioned a lot today, and of course planning. I have to say something about that since I told my wife this morning I was coming to talk to her species. So I needed to include that somewhere in there. I think I've figured out how to do so. But Joel mentioned that this is not easy, and this is a quote from one of my colleagues who was the former CIO of EPA, which certainly is not an easy job either. And when she was talking about smart communities, smart connected cities, and really it's about the collaboration that needs to occur and aligning stakeholders' needs, which can be a big challenge in our society today, as Mayor Robideaux mentioned. And so this case study has, I'll start a little bit with just who CGI is and why we're in Lafayette, and that's in the upper left. We have an onshore center of excellence there. So CGI has about 68,000 members in 40 different countries, and in 2014 is when we announced that we were going to come to Lafayette, and that's a partnership with the state of Louisiana, LED, Lafayette Economic Development Authority, the University of Louisiana at Lafayette was the third partner in addition to us as part of this agreement. And we committed to bring 400 jobs by 2018 and then to carry that forward for an entire period of 10 years, which has an estimated economic development impact of $90 million a year when we're at capacity. As of today, we're probably around like 385 or so people. We're about a year ahead of schedule, and that doesn't happen without a really close alignment of all of the objectives across all these different parties. And one of the interesting things is that 15% of our workforce doesn't own a car, which Joel mentioned that we are bringing this workforce is bringing expectations, and it's bringing new demands on our community as well. That if you have 60 to 80 people or whatever it's going to be in Lafayette who don't own an automobile or trying to get to work every day, that's going to change your demand for where your housing is going to be, what your transportation infrastructure looks like. And so these things all go hand in hand. You have to figure out the right way to put these puzzle pieces together. The next thing I'll mention is the STEM camps, and because Learn is my deep dive a little bit more, but a part of our commitment to the community is making sure that we address this digital equity and the digital divide. And I'll tell a little anecdote about this that really hit home for me. We're participating in something called the Congressional App Challenge, which is done all across the U.S. Your congressmen and women can sponsor teams from your local schools to basically build an app that can do anything just related to your community. And they have a period of time where they have to get the app done, and you submit it. And there's a registration process for it. And so you have to go online and fill it out, and the students have to do it. And so we kind of, we entered into the competition late, and all of our teams, they sort of procrastinated on registering their individual students for whatever reason, just human nature or whatever. And so they had built apps, like one of them is a flood related app. And they're all excited about it, and they're getting to the deadline to submit their app, and they realize they hadn't registered. So they go on there, and at least 2 out of 3 teams had students who didn't even have an email address. So when you hear like Mayor Burke talk about I think it was Tech Goes Home, like how do I get an email address? Like that's not happening just for people who are senior citizens. It's happening for students in grade and middle schools. And the same thing, like when they're building these apps, they had to come to the library to do it. They don't have a computer at home. And so when we see these dialogues in our communities about public infrastructure like libraries, it's real. People don't realize that because we're fortunate and we have computers at home, we have email addresses for forever. I just think like it's stories like that just really hit home and make it, I think, incumbent upon all of us as we're looking at smart cities, how to make sure we don't leave socioeconomic groups behind as the rest of the community moves forward. And so then I'll touch a little bit on Learn for Smart Cities. So this is the Lafayette Engagement and Research Network is what that stands for. I'll go back to that one. So here's what we're doing. It was a little bit opportunistic. It was grant funding that we won, just $40,000. So if you're talking about starting small and failing fast, and all those kind of things that people talk about in technology these days, lean startup and agile methodologies, with $40K that you do that quickly. This came from the EPA, and what we're doing is we're deploying up to 300 air quality sensors around the city of Lafayette. They're going to measure particulate matter and ozone, which both can have dramatic impacts on your health, especially for at-risk populations. But these sensors are cheap. They have to be. Because we're getting 300 at $40K. You can't get a lot of them. There's one regulatory sensor in the city of Lafayette that measures this now. And so going from one, which has a very small geographic footprint and temporal footprint as well, as how often it's collecting and feeding people information. To go from 1 to 300 completely changes the dynamic. But the quality of the data also changes. If you're spending $15,000 on a regulatory sensor, it's a lot different than $100 on a cheap one. And so it's a really interesting big data problem because we have more of it, but how do we make sense of it if it's of different levels of quality? And you solve that by things like calibration of the sensors, and then also a lot of these detailed models in the research community at the university. And so this is an example where you see, like, we're interested in this project because it's going to bring expertise to us that we can then transfer to the market and sell to other customers. The university is interested in it because it's building a workforce, and the community is interested in it because it's going to change the way that we view environmental quality and quality of life within the city. So you have all these three pieces coming together. It ties back to STEM as well, because in addition to us building these, which literally I walk down the hallway and there's like a Java programmer soldering something, it scares me. But we're taking that into the schools. And so the students in Lafayette Parish will help us assemble these sensors. We're going to deploy these sensors on their schools. They're going to see the data that's coming in, and they can use it in any way they want. And so we're basically all those different pieces of the puzzle coming together in one project, which is, I just think, a really cool story. The slide I skipped is the team. And this is alignment of all the stakeholders. So we started with LCG and UL and CGI, and then we reached out to LEDA, our Economic Development Authority, and we're like, hey, can you help with this? Because they had someone who was focused on sustainability, and they have ties into the business community. We went to our Chamber of Commerce, one Acadiana, and we're like, hey, we're going to need more sites to put these on. Can you help build awareness of what this project's about? Our community college is involved in helping us assemble the sensors, and they're going to be able to access and use the data in their programs. And then we reached out to all these partners on the bottom, LDEQ to help us with understanding environmental data and information. We reached out to the city of Chicago at C&T. Chattanooga is where the Enterprise Center is. They have experts in this. And so we were like, hey, you guys are doing some of this. Do you want to help out and just give us advice? And they're actually taking some of our sensors and they're going to deploy it in Chattanooga, which is really neat. And then we're using Microsoft's cloud, and US Ignite is contributing some funding in order to help us get the last mile with some of the technology. So this is a really amazing team, and the partners continue to grow. And so it's been a pretty awesome project, again, centered on air quality, which I call that opportunistic because that's not the most pressing problem in Lafayette. It's, as we've talked about a lot through the course of the day, it's flooding. I'll jump to that in a second. This is just an example of what these look like. We've gotten a little bit smaller. We put it in a plastic box, and we contact LCG, and they bring out the Public Works Department, and they put them on all the traffic signals around town, so you can kind of see where we're going to put them. This is the footprint. The black is, I think, all the traffic signals, and then we've got some of the schools up here and everything. And we've worked with the university and the city to figure out where are some of the areas we think we want to put this based on where there might be environmental justice issues or transportation stress, those kind of things. I know I'm skipping on back and forth, sorry, but and then there's this, which is you get all this data, what do you do with it, right? And so this is what a computer scientist thinks is a meaningful view of the air quality data, and so we know this ain't going to work, right? So now we're holding sessions where we're going out and we're telling people, hey, we're doing this project, and we're going to give you something so you can look at it and understand it. How would you use that, right? And really, your average person is going to come in and they're just going to see, like, EPA has something called the Air Quality Index, and it's green, yellow, red, purple, right? Purple being the worst. And that's what you want to know. Like, I'm here, what's it look like? And we're going to be able to do that in a way that, with a level of accuracy that's never been done before in the city. So it'll be pretty exciting. So, and then again, I mentioned it was opportunistic. So how do we use this moving forward? And Ramesh mentioned this a little bit with Dr. Ahmad Habib, who's working on a project with us where we're trying to take the concept of low-cost air quality sensors and apply it to low-cost stream gauge and stream flow and turbidity type sensors that you would put all the way down to the coulee level in Lafayette. So we saw earlier today the Water Institute for the Gulf talked about the data they have available from the federal government, and that's typically maybe in the Vermilion River. Well, if you want to go down to a coulee mean watershed and and look at where the flooding occurred somewhere in the middle of the parish there, and we're not going to have any data there. And so the idea is how do we take low-cost water-related sensors and embed them into our cooling network and use the same technical architecture that we're using for the air quality stuff to sort of solve this problem. The map on the right is where flooding occurred in 2016, and the map on the left is where projected growth is in Lafayette. So if you have sort of this low-level data down to the coulee level, you can start to wrestle with some of the really complex challenges that we're facing, which deals with where we're growing our community, how much impervious surface we're going to put there, what are the impacts of things like climate change on the amount, the frequency of these types of storms that are happening, right? And so with data, we'll be able to be more informed about all of this and help direct the strategic, or provide strategic direction for how and where we want to grow. So we're really excited about where that project is heading. And I'll leave you with our contact information, and I think I left 3 minutes for questions, which was perfectly timed since you can't ask us any hard ones. So thank you very much.
Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can try the first one. So the air quality sensors, we just got like 300 Raspberry Pis shipped into our office last week. So I think we're going to see the majority of them deployed by the beginning or first quarter of calendar year 2018, and then they'll be up for about a year. And after a year, then we'll figure out sort of what we do with those. The water quality one is a bit exploratory right now. We're applying for a lot of grants. I don't know if Ramesh has more detailed timelines on his side, but that's where we want to take it. And so it's a little bit subject to some funding questions. I don't know if you have more information on it.
Not only funding, but we need to do this right. I mean, those of you in CPEX know that you must engage your political leadership and regional leadership in order to do this at a watershed level. So right now what we are doing is to work with Acadiana Planning Commission, which is your sister organization in Acadiana, and which has 9 or 8 parish presidents on their board along with the president of the university. And we are meeting with each of the parish presidents in small groups to talk to them about the architecture. And once we have all of us pulling in the same direction, which we are more or less, then we develop a solution that is connected to funding. The good news is there is funding for initiatives such as this. What we need to have is the political will to kind of do this as not very suboptimal local solutions, but to do this at the watershed level. And that's what we are working on. Fortunately for us in Acadiana, we've had the Acadiana Planning Commission doing this for many years, much before we've had the 2016 flooding. So we already had in place the community infrastructure to have the leaders sitting at the table. And I think we are well positioned to having a project kick off in the next 6 months or so. Like I said, the technology is the easy part of it, and we have the technical architecture in place. So that's where we are headed next. Absolutely.
I want to thank Fishman Haygood for sponsoring this and our wonderful panelists. It was just delightful. Thank you so much.